Hey everybody, it's time to get tinkering with Tinkercad. Let's go ahead and sign in like I showed you in the last video, clicking on More Providers and sign in with Google. Once you're signed in, you're going to want to click Yes, Remember Me so that you don't have to keep signing in. And then you're going to notice that you're at your main dashboard. If you go to the upper left-hand corner where you see that Tinkercad icon, remember that whenever you click that, it's going to take you back to this dashboard view. In your collections area, you'll see lessons. That's where your tutorials will show up once you've completed them. And you'll see options about creating new designs. Right now there are two options, the new design and the legacy design. The legacy design goes with the old version of Tinkercad. We're starting with create new design. Once you click create new design, it should create a brand new project for you, and you're going to see the work plane view. The work plane is that blue grid in the bottom. You're also going to see a really bizarre name, in this case Funky Hango Magello. When you click on the menu next to it and click on the sprocket, it'll take you to a place where you can change the name. Remember, your normal school rules apply. Make sure that you use appropriate language. Also, we want to set the visibility to public so that you're able to hand it in to your teacher. If it's set at private, your teacher is not going to be able to see the live file. Under licensing, I keep mine at the default Share Alike 3.0 attribution, but there are other options. And before you save your changes, make sure that you put your name on your file. And then go ahead, save changes, and we can click in the gray area behind it so that we can get back to our design. Notice the name changed at the top. Again, this is our work plane view. And at the bottom, you have some options for modifying the grid or the scale of whatever you're designing. If you click Edit Grid, you can change between millimeters and inches. There's some presets in terms of dimension with width and height. I prefer to keep the default preset just because I might want to print this on a different printer, and I don't change my width and height. If you do need to make a change, like from millimeters to inches, go ahead and click Update Grid. I'm just going to click Cancel on mine because I haven't made any changes. And for the Snap to Grid, you have different options. I usually keep mine at the smallest, 0.1 millimeter, so that I can use my up, down, right, and left arrows to nudge objects along. That gives me a little bit more precision. Anyway, more precision than I can get with a mouse or a trackpad. We have the cube in the upper left-hand corner that will allow us to toggle different views. Basically, you rotate the cube however you would like to get different perspectives. When you click on the house, you get to your home view. You can zoom in, zoom out. You can also drag with your trackpad to zoom in and out. There's also an orthographic view. It kind of flattens everything, which can be really handy in engineering design, but for what we're doing right now, when we're just doing our initial projects, that's not going to be terribly helpful, so we're going to stick with the perspective design. At the top, we have something that looks like a Rubik's Cube. That's a view we're in now. We also have the shape generator that lets you actually code in your own shape processing, and there's a Minecraft view. We're not going to be using those, so we go back to the one that looks like a Rubik's Cube. We also have a way to use our work plane tool and our ruler tools. We'll get to that later. And a huge variety of different shapes. We're going to start with the box. Keep in mind all of these are 3D objects, so they have basically an X, a Y, and a Z axis. We'll talk about that more in class. You can also change the color of an object. You can use the sliders to change various aspects, but I like to use the ruler to do that. So you drag the ruler down, and you can manually edit those numbers. Of course, without the ruler, you can just use the paddles. That can be pretty good, but you don't get a whole lot of precision with that. So I like to manually enter whenever possible, and that gives me the precise number that I would like for my dimensions. You can also drag in more 3D objects, in this case a cylinder. And if you use that little triangle tool, you can raise and lower the object. You'll also notice some rotational possibilities too. When you have that empty space underneath, though, use that with caution because that can wreak havoc with the printer. Printers don't like to print into thin air. It can look really cool for a project that's just going to stay digital, but if you're actually going to do something with it practically, it's not going to be terribly helpful. So you can drag it back down. I run into issues when I do that, however. I have a hard time getting it exactly on the work plane, so I like to type that in manually. Again, you need to have that ruler tool visible to do that. And now you can drag that wherever you'd like to. You can also change the color. Keep in mind that most 3D printers only print in a single color of filament when you're printing. Okay, so you can move that anywhere you'd like to on the work plane. Or you can use your arrow keys and just kind of nudge it over ever so slightly. You can also change that snap grid to a larger number. And in this case 5 millimeters, and each time you use your arrow keys, it'll scoot it over a full 5 millimeters. You can also group objects by making a giant box around them, and then clicking the group icon in the top, and now it looks like one object. Kind of a lumpy object, but one object. You can also ungroup them by clicking the next icon over. And that whole feature basically makes it negative space, so you can pull one object inside of another object and take a bite out of it by clicking group. And now looking at it from different angles, it literally looks like I took a bite out of it. And there are a lot of different 3D objects to choose from. When you go under that basic shapes menu, you see text, symbols, connectors. The extras are a lot of fun to play with, especially if you're trying to make little creatures. My particular favorite is that little yellow chick foot. You'll also see shape generators. And those are little mini scripts that people have created to generate their own shapes. And then they're pretty customizable. Chances are for most projects you're probably not going to need a map of New York, but there are other things a little bit more practical you can work with, and you can use those sliders to change the scale and dimensions. I encourage you to play and explore with these. That's really a great way to learn and figure it out. You can also drag in other designs and favorite them so that they show up in your favorites under your collection. That way, if it's something you use frequently, you can come back to it anytime. You won't have to search through a big list. Notice that it says all changes saved. As you work, when you make changes, it should be saving automatically. Just keep an eye in that corner, especially if your Wi-Fi connection isn't the greatest. Now I'm going to select these two objects and play with their alignment. Aligning is kind of like getting things in an even spacing. It's not that different from when you're working with text and justification. So I've highlighted both of these objects, and now I can click on those black dots to change how they coordinate with each other. By clicking that one in the center, it made their centers align. And I'm going to click the other center, so we've got our vertical and our horizontal. And that looks like kind of a bizarre object, but when we group them, you notice it becomes something totally different, kind of like a Mr. Potato Head with giant ears. So you have lots of different options to work with Tinkercad. Really, the only limit is your imagination. Take some time, play, explore, figure it out. Make sure you go through all the tutorials. Those are going to be especially helpful when you're trying to get with the little details. Please let me know if you have other questions. I look forward to seeing what you design. Enjoy tinkering!